For some analysis, we can speak to our Chief International Affairs Editor, Robert Parsons. Morning to you, Robert.
Good morning.
Tell us more about what we know about this kidnapping that originated actually in Benin.
Well, not very much, it has to be said, about the group that carried out the kidnapping. Last week at a press conference that the Defence Minister, Florence Parly, held to discuss the release of the hostages and the death of the two Special Forces officers that you were talking about, Florence Parly said that they knew very little about the organisation that carried out the attack, but their concern was that they would be transferred to a more organised group inside Mali. It's interesting, though, that first of all, that the kidnapping took place in Benin, which suggests that the Islamist groups that really started up in the Sahel, the area that you referred to in your introduction, are now spreading south through Burkina Faso into coastal areas like Benin, but also Ivory Coast, and that they're not just the organised Islamist groups. These are sometimes simply tribal militias or trafficking groups dealing in drugs and weapons, which complicates the issue for organisations, like the French military that are trying to deal with it. But the big concern was that the hostages would be transferred to one of the main organisations, like the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims. An umbrella organisation has brought together some of the main organisations across the Sahel, becoming increasingly lethal over the last few years, responsible for somewhere in the region of 1,100 deaths last year alone. And if that had happened, tracking them down would have been that much more difficult. So that was why the operation took place, decided to release them whilst they were still in Burkina Faso rather than going into Mali, because of the complexities and the difficulties of releasing hostages if they'd been taken by a big organisation like that one.
Rob, France has this initiative called Opération Barkhane. It replaced Operation Serval back in 2014. What do we know about the French troops in the region?
Well, absolutely. It took over from Serval in 2014. Serval was set up in Mali following a massive incursion into southern Mali by Tuaregs and by Islamist groups. The French military moved in, managed to push them back. A permanent presence was set up 2014 with Operation Barkhane, somewhere in the region of 4,500 men, most of them, about 2,700 of them, based in Mali, but otherwise spread across the region, including special forces of the kind we saw used in that operation in Burkina Faso, but also with backup 20 helicopters, fighter jets, lots of armour, and primarily their role, as defined by the defence minister at the time, Jean-Yves Le Drian, now foreign minister, is to carry out counter-terrorism and to block off the highway of trafficking across the Sahel through Libya and thence into Europe. Trafficking in everything, human beings, drugs and arms. Essentially, that is the role of Barkhane. It gets a certain amount of strategic help from the British and the Germans and intelligence from the Americans, again, as we saw in that hostage release operation in Burkina Faso.
And yet France isn't acting alone. French soldiers are training a G5 Sahel force, a regional force, and there's also a very large UN force there as well. How are they coping?
Well, you're right. There are other organisations operating. G5 Sahel is one of the main ones. Again, this is about 5,000 men, battalions drawn from the Sahel countries. Also, MINUSMA, which is a 16,000 UN force based in Mali. And in addition to that, there are about 4 EU training missions dotted around the area as well. Whether they're effective or not remains to be seen. General Lecointe, the head of the French armed forces, says that he believes that the counter-terrorism operation is getting a grip, but it remains the fact that these terrorist organisations are increasingly lethal and increasingly widespread.
All right, thanks very much, Rob. Rob Parsons, our Chief International Affairs Editor. Time now for a daily focus.